It could be potential blowouts, but for the most part, it puts stock decks at even playing field versus someone who gained an advantage early in the tournament by having a relatively unknown strategy.
So Michael Majors, the second overall seed in the tournament. He'll be on the play. Tom Roth's your 6th seed on the draw. Right, Michael's contemplating his opening hand here. Looks like he is taking a mulligan.
Yeah, I mean, he knows he needs to have a very defensive hand in this matchup. Almost has to play the control role because Tom can't. So he's definitely going to be looking to have at least one, hopefully 2 early spell removal spells, maybe something like a Daze, a Wasteland, or a Force of Will with a blue card on backup, while also like having the Dream opener with also a Delver of Secrets or something.
So Michael Majors and Tom Ross, if you follow primarily the Varsity Games Open Series, not necessarily players you're familiar with, not a lot of results there, but both Michael Majors and Tom Ross with significant Grand Prix and even Pro Tour resumes.
Yeah, Tom Ross, I believe, has a Pro Tour top 8 from Hawaii 2009?
Correct.
2010? No, it's 2009.
Yeah.
So, and Michael Majors, second at Grand Prix Atlanta, a little over a year ago with, I believe, a Delver deck as well. And it was a Legacy Grand Prix too. So Michael definitely knows his way around Legacy, and he's proven it here with a top 4 berth and potential for further cash prizes as well as that trophy.
Much better than my performance at Grand Prix Atlanta, where I dropped after receiving a single loss.
Well, you cut yourself short.
Who knows? Maybe I could have been the one to come in second, but
yeah.
We'll never know.
My the first opponent I played at Pro Tour Valencia in the first round of draft, I beat him, and he went on to make top 8.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you that it's even if you lose really early in a tournament, you should never give up. Once you're finally eliminated from potential contention, then sure, give up whatever you want to do. Go get a snack, take a nap. Don't give up, man. Come on.
You and I are different. It looks like Michael Majors keeping a hand of a lot of cheap removal. Oh, no, he's mulliganing again.
Yeah.
It looked like he had a halfway reasonable hand of a Bolt, Swords of Plowshare, Force of Will, and a blue card, but only 2 Wastelands as mana. It did seem like he was contemplating keeping that on 6, but he's going down for 5 cards.
Yeah, I mean, he was on the play, so it's a little risky if he just never draws a fetch land. He's not going to be able to turn on any of his removal spells. The Wastelands could potentially be strong if Tom is reliant on Inkmoth Nexus, but that's not really a gamble you want to take when you can die so quickly to a Glistener Elf or a Blighted Agent.
So Michael being pretty aggressive. And again, these blue-white red Delver decks pretty good at recouping mulligans, especially through Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, I mean, you have Stoneforge Mystic being one of the primary ways of gaining actual card advantage in Legacy. Cards like Brainstorm, Ponder, their card quality, they don't actually up your card count at all. And when you have stuff like Stoneforge Mystic to help mitigate mulligans, it does a much better job than something like Brainstorm, which you don't really have the resources to put back on top of your deck when you're mulliganing to 5.
So Tom here keeping his 7-card hand. We actually saw Tom win on a mulligan to 5 earlier today as well.
Yeah, against old Brian Brown doing just the old humility versus Inkmoth awkward interactions.
So Michael looking at a hand here again. It appears that Wasteland is his only source of mana yet again.
I think I saw Misty Rainforest, but perhaps it was
I think it was a Stoneforge Mystic.
Okay.
So again, Michael, without a colored source of mana, he's going to go down to 4 cards. And now things start to look pretty bleak. Again, these Delver decks, they don't have a lot in terms of actual sources of mana, and they're leaning on cantrips to often glue together these 1-land hands, going down to 4 cards. Bad in any circumstance, but especially when it increases the likelihood that you're going to be drawing up 0-land hands.
Yeah, I agree. And I wouldn't actually count Michael out here in this game. I know mulligans to 4 are pretty gross, especially in formats like Standard, where a single mulligan can be detrimental to like how your game plays out. But in Legacy, you have a lot of really powerful cards. Something just like a single Wasteland could buy him enough time to draw back into the game. I actually heard of multiple friends of mine who won on mulligans to 4 and 3 respectively today, so anything's possible.
Okay, I think Michael Majors has a colored source of mana and a Brainstorm, so I can't imagine this one's going back, and he keeps his 4-card hand.
Yeah, depending on how his hand looks, I'm not even that opposed to just main phasing a Brainstorm when you mulligan to 4 because if it gets dazed or Spell Pierce or something, that's just abysmal.
So you look at a hand here, Brainstorm and 2 copies of Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely he just wants a Brainstorm anyway to hit the second land for Stoneforge Mystic, so not playing around the daze feels like pretty gross here, actually, but hopefully it doesn't come back to bite him too bad.
So Tom sacks his Misty Rainforest, goes and gets Tropical Island, and I imagine we're going to see one of his green 1-drops here, either Glistener Elf or perhaps Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, I mean, it seems likely. There's very little reason other than that for him to fetch here on turn 1. Noble Hierarch, obviously not nearly as big of a threat as, like Glistener Elf or potentially Blighted Agent or Inkmoth Nexus.
So Spell Pierce the draw for Michael there. No help finding a second land.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. And Tom, it does appear that he has drawn his 1 main deck Stifle, and we have seen this come up before, and I suspect we may see it come up again in this game.
Oh, man. I love it and I hate it. I love it for Tom and I hate it for Michael, but I actually heard some horror stories about the one of Stifle today beating my friend Tannen Grace when Tom had to fight his teammate Tannen in a match earlier today.
So Inkmoth Nexus into Blighted Agent, and Tom's really setting up shop here. Multiple sources of infect, and with those Noble Hierarchs in play, each of them represent a lot of potential infect.
Yeah, and still no second land for Michael. He's been waiting on this Brainstorm for a while. I feel like he's at a point now with the Blighted Agent going to be attacking for 3 next turn, and the Stifle just going to be the Stone Cold blowouts. Let's move to the next game, boys.
So that Stifle, Tom, again, his 1 main deck Stifle, crippling Michael even further. And now Tom goes to his turn. It would not surprise me to see Tom actually just kill him this turn.
Yeah, Ponder here digging for an actual pump spell, which I don't think he has yet. He could potentially crop rotation into Pendlehaven before attacks, target the Blighted Agent, and then swing for 4 points, which puts Michael on a 3-turn clock as opposed to a current 4-turn clock.
So Tom deciding if he wants to keep, he does. There was a Spell Pierce in that top 3, very good against a land-screwed opponent who has a lot of 1-mana pieces of disruption against you potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Tom here definitely tanking on whether or not he should crop rotation. Personally, I think he should. Shrinking the clock here is pretty important, though. I'm sure the math running through his head includes the one of Wasteland in his deck, which he could use to cripple Michael even further if he goes fetch land into, like a removal spell next turn.
So Blighted Agent coming across here, multiple Exalted triggers, and 3 points of infect come across to Michael.
Yeah, and Tom definitely in the driver's seat here. Major's obviously mulliganing to 4, getting his 1 land stifled. Not really putting out much of a fight.
Tom breaks the Verdant Catacomb. And clearly well ahead on the board at this point. Should be wrapping up the first game shortly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever want to say that someone is completely dead or out of the game, but in Legacy, a lot of times it's pretty clear who's going to win the game 3+ turns before the game actually ends, just because of how grindy some of the games and some of the matches can be. Here, Major's obviously no permanents in play on turn 5 or 6 or what have you, and basically all but out of the game, especially now that he did not draw a land on this turn either.
So Michael up to 6 points of infect. Crop rotation, or excuse me, another Noble Hierarch that gives him the needed third piece of Exalted for 4 points of infect, and that's 10. And Tom Ross quickly up a game against Michael Majors.
Yeah, nothing too explosive here for Tom. Like obviously just beating down with 1 infect creature and a bunch of Noble Hierarchs gets the job done a lot of times, especially against people who are, a little mana screwed.
Landless.
A little mana screwed.
Welcome back to the booth. Patrick Sullivan, Todd Anderson, Star City Games Legacy Open here in Atlanta. It is trivia time. Again, the way that this works is I'm going to ask a trivia question.
Why do you always get to ask the questions?
So I have a question ready.
I mean, what if I do too?
But you should have said something.
I don't.
See, all right, you're learning. Tweet that answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium. Of the correct respondents, one will be selected at random. That person will receive 6 free months of Star City Games Premium, where you can enjoy all of our best content, including videos and articles from this gentleman right here.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out our versus videos series on the premium side, me and Brad Nelson do that twice a week, and people seem to like them. I like them. They're fun to do, and hopefully they're fun to watch.
So, trivia time. Tom Ross's Infect deck, again, talk of the tournament right now. He has crop rotation primarily for Inkmoth Nexus, a little other utility in the deck as well. He has one colorless land in his deck, a single copy of a colorless land. That's part of his crop rotation package. Name that land. Again, tweet at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium, and one of you will be selected for 6 free
I
months of
gotta check
Star
his
City Games
deck
Premium.
list. I don't actually remember what it is. I'm just kidding. I said it out loud like 3 minutes ago. So
To the sideboard. To the sideboard. You have Tom's list in front of you. What are we looking at here?
all right. So Tom has a very interesting sideboard full of a lot of one-ofs, but all of that has to do with the fact that his deck is very, I don't know, I want to say off-putting. He has a lot of cards that do very specific things, and he only has a singleton, such as like a Berserk, a Spell Pierce, a Stifle, Nature's Claim main deck, which is really interesting. But out of the board, we have a Swan Song, a Dispel, a Relic of Progenitus, a Misdirection, Bajuka Bog, Dismember, Submerge, Viridian Corruptor, 2 copies of Necropede because 1 wasn't enough. 1 more Berserk, a Sylvan Library, and 3 more Nature's Claims. I have a feeling that Tom's going to be bringing in the Sylvan Library just because Major's plan is going to be to grind him out of creatures with so many removal spells. So just having the ability to draw a bunch of extra cards is pretty sweet. Other than that, possibly a Dismember just to take out Stoneforge Mystic or an early Delver Seekers to buy him more time. But yeah, maybe the Dispel since there are so many removal spells, but probably not Swan Song.
And on Michael Major's side, we have a Wear Tear, a Sword of Peace and Fam, and a Source of Plowshares. He's moved 1 of the sideboard, 3 in his main deck. 2 copies of Rest in Peace, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 4 Meddling Mages, 2 Grim Lavamancers, 2 Flusterstorms. I really like Grim Lavamancer a lot in this matchup. Of course, Tom, he can work around it with instant speed pump spells, but certainly a recurring source of cheap damage, very valuable for Majors here.
Yep.
I like the Wear Tear as one of the best cards in Tom's deck is Inkmoth Nexus, so having a way to fight over that is very nice. I also think it's reasonable for Meddling Mage to come in as well. It cuts out a lot of outs in some spots. Tom's deck doesn't have that much in the way of actual ways to get an Infect creature into play. There's 8 total alongside the 4 Inkmoth Nexuses, and then crop rotation to get that online.
Yeah, I'm actually just waiting for Meddling Mage naming Invigorate. That's actually what I'm expecting to happen, and I don't think it has literally ever happened before. Lots of firsts today, at least for me.
Yep. And Tom's deck really not flush with creature removal. If there's any weakness you can identify here, it's that he's basically devoted to his combo. It's hard for him to add main deck creature removal spells, and therefore creatures with utility against the stuff that he's doing is quite potent. Grim Lavamancer most notably, but I think Meddling Mage can serve that role as well.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting. Tom's deck actually functions like a combo deck. It's basically a combo deck, but a lot of times it plays out like an aggro deck. It can play like last game where it goes 1 creature and a bunch of Noble Hierarchs and just slowly grind you out of the game in a way that you don't really have a lot of things to interact with. But at the same time, he can just kill you in 1 shot with a pump spell or 2 pump spells and possibly a Berserk thrown in there somewhere, while also having disruption like Daze, Force of Will, like I said, the Stifle, and a potentially Spell Pierce. So, Tom's deck, a very interesting take on a hybrid combo / aggro deck.
Yeah, and there's a lot of room for those kind of decks in Legacy. I would typify decks like Burn, Elves, and Affinity all having the potential to play kind of conventional attacking games, and also have the ability to be either a combo deck or just fundamentally non-interactive. Tom's deck definitely in that spectrum as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty standard now to classify Affinity and Modern, for example, as a aggro combo deck, simply because it does have the draws that go Signal Pest into 4 guys, attack a bunch, but it also has the potential to just combo kill you with Cranial Plating and Arcbound Ravager or Inkmoth Nexus with either of those 2 cards.
Yeah, so a lot of hybrid beatdown / combo decks, and it kind of there's even a spectrum within that. I would say that Elves is certainly a combo deck first, and then beatdown deck sort of as a backup.
Yeah, I mean, there are some times where your natural orders go get Progenitus, and you just like have to play defense for a few turns while your Progenitus takes home the bacon. But
chump blocking with your 1/1s and 1/2s while Progenitus gets it done.
Yeah, but other times, you combo out with Glimpse of Nature, draw most of your deck, and then usually finish off with a gigantic Crater of Behemoth.
So moving on to game 2 here, Michael Majors down a game after a mulligan to 4. Tom Ross will be on the draw up a game.
So it looks like on Major's side, he's looking at a Daze. It looks like a couple of Swords of Plowshares and a Stoneforge Mystic. So a very, very good hand for this matchup. He's going to look to not die on turn 2 when he casts Stoneforge Mystic. Hopefully with the Daze in hand, that won't be an issue. But we've seen Tom's deck kill out of nowhere multiple times today, so I would not be surprised in the slightest.
Both only first turn land drops for each player, and now Michael Majors adds the second Tundra to the board and attempts to resolve Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, if Tom has access to Daze here, I think it would be a very strong play to float a blue mana and then cast Daze. That way he gets to play around his opponent's Daze, but also buys him a lot of time because Stoneforge Mystic with either Jitte or Batterskull is a very, very reasonable clock.
I would imagine Umezawa's Jitte the biggest threat from Tom's side is he doesn't really care about Michael gaining life with the way his path to victory is set up.
Yeah, luckily Umezawa's Jitte has 2 other modes. That card is not a real Magic card. Legacy's really weird. It's really funny. They try to do all these cute things for various blocks, like Kamigawa with Umezawa's Jitte was pretty funny because they made this one equipment, right? I mean, they made a few, but they made one that just stood out among the rest that kind of paired with a legend, and it was embarrassing how much better the equipment was than the legend guy himself.
Yeah. What is a game design lesson about Umezawa's Jitte was there was a last-minute change that got made to the card, and in the history of TCG design and development, most of the catastrophes involve a last-minute change to the card.
Yeah, I don't even want to know what the last-minute change was, so don't tell me. It would probably make me sick.
So end of turn Brainstorm here from Tom.
This still could. Oh no, I'm sorry. I was going to say it could potentially be in response to the Stoneforge, but he's already searched up the Batterskull, so.
So Tom Ross has sideboarded in his Misdirection as he has just seen it off the Brainstorm here.
Yeah, Tom not opting for a 4th Force of Will on the board like some decks do. He does only have 3 in his main deck. Instead, going for the Misdirection as potentially a way to turn the opponent's removal spells on its own creatures, which is actually pretty cool. If Majors ever tries to, plow or lightning bolt his guys, he gets him misdirected to the Stoneforge Mystic or Delver of Secrets itself.
So Gitaxian Probe and a big draw for Michael here as Tom played Inkmoth Nexus last turn. Obviously very threatening, and getting to find out about Tom's hand, incredibly valuable for how he wants to proceed, and it is loaded as you see Misdirection, Brainstorm, Invigorate, a couple others that we haven't quite laid out yet, but definitely a lot of gas in here.
Yeah, Vines of the Vastwood being particularly strong at countering removal spells in general. And his hand just looks just so good. 2 Invigorates, Stifle, Land, Vines, Misdirection, Brainstorm. So it's going to be pretty hard for Michael to fight through all this, even with double Swords of Plowshares, since the Vines of the Vastwood will counter one of them, and Misdirection can counter the other one, and then double Invigorate is almost lethal. So if he waits one more turn, he can kick the Vines of the Vastwood even, and that's all she wrote.
So it is possible we could be seeing a turn 3 kill through 2 Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah,
that's in play right now.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for Michael, he does have the Daze in hand as well, and that is going to be able to counter the Vines of the Vastwood. So, it's not like this is easy peasy for Tom. He still has a lot of work to do, and it's very likely he gets blown out next turn if he goes for it. But Tom has been playing this deck a while. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders when it comes to playing around spell removal and counter spells like this. So he could very easily just wait another turn to play around the Daze.
Particularly with Stifle in his hand, he can stifle the living weapon trigger on Batterskull, and that buys him a boatload of time to assemble a better hand.
Right. He also has access to a Brainstorm at the moment, which will maybe if he wants to dig for a little more action, it could be important for just making sure that he has enough protection for his combo, his land drop, so that he can play around Spell Pierce and Daze.
Yeah, that Gitaxian Probe was a really big draw there for Michael, knowing now the full extent of what he's dealing with. what he's dealing with is an excellent hand.
Yeah, Michael has, it looks like 3 Swords of Plowshares, a Grimlock Mancer, a Daze, another Stoneforge Mystic, even a Lightning Bolt, or no, I'm sorry, that's the Grimlock Mancer, but just a handful of removal and a Daze, and he's just going to have to hope that that's good enough. And if Tom's able to fight through it, like we've seen so many times before, then Michael could just end up dead in the next turn or two. But again, he does have the Daze, so if Tom goes for a next turn, it's going to be a disaster.
So Michael sets down, plays his Tundra, and passes the turn. Ponder the draw for Tom.
Yep, it looks like Tom's going to go for the kill here. Or, not the kill, but the 9 point of poison. And if I were him, I would feel relatively safe as well. But
he is not. He is just, he senses that there could be a trap here, and he just says, take one.
Sure. And maybe that's smart on Michael's part, too, because he's able to, threaten the double removal spell plus counter spell or something like that. And he's able to get Batterskull into play, which unlocks next turn of him having access to more mana to play around a potential Daze or Spell Pierce from Tom.
So Batterskull enters play. Tom elects not to fight over it with a Stifle, simply lets it in, and across for 5 points of damage.
Yeah. I'm not keen on letting the Germ resolve, but that extra blue card in hand for Force Will, for Misdirection could end up mattering a lot. Plus, it's not so bad for the Germ to actually be in play so that he has more things to misdirect to if necessary.
So Michael attempting to break a fetch land here, which could unlock red mana. And now this is giving Tom pause, and perhaps we might see the Stifle.
Yeah, and maybe he was saving it more for that so he wouldn't have to worry about Lightning Bolt. Because it's much more likely that Michael has like one of, a bolt and a plow as opposed to 2 plows or 3 plows as he currently has access to. So, it's going to be really hard for Tom to fight through all this. But with Misdirection, he is going to be able to buy himself a lot of time here by being able to misdirect one of the Swords of Plowshares to the Germ token.
So this is prompting Tom to act here, so...
It's funny, this is actually the second time Tom has faced it off against BBD in this topic.
Probably not the first time he's seen the Germ tokens also.
Sure.
It could be the second, third, or fourth, or fifth time,
Yeah. I think there's a reasonable chance that Michael tries to get max value here out of his Daze and actually just dazes the Stifle, which I don't hate as a play, but he doesn't actually have much to do with that mana, that he's floating. So he can still cast 2 Swords of Plowshares. So.
The issue here, of course, is let's say we fight over this. We go ahead and we Daze, and then we play the Grim Lavamancer. The Grim Lavamancer adds nothing to the table this turn. It's only a setup for additional turns. So it does increase the chances in the short term that Michael just dies.
Sure.
Because Tom's a little bottlenecked on mana. And, yeah, Michael's just not going to fight over it. Both players, really respecting each other's potential, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. I think both players playing very well at the moment, both kind of dancing around all the potential cards that each other could have, sensing out the removal spells and the tricks very, very nicely. Major's having a little bit of a leg up, though, since he did have Gitaxian Probe early on in the game.
Nexus is activated. Tom is making his move now.
Yeah.
Pays the alternate cost on Invigorate.
I think this is going to end poorly for Tom, but we'll see.
2 Invigorates coming across a 9 power inbound Nexus. This is a lethal attack. Source of Plowshares from Michael. Vines in response to try to make his Nexus untargetable.
Yeah, this is a really tense moment in the game for both players because they both know if they make one minor mistake in this situation, it could all go wrong.
Sequencing so important here. This is going to be a challenging turn to navigate for both players. Another Source of Plowshares in response. Tom tries to misdirect, discarding Ponder.
Yeah, and I think Tom is just out of, ways to protect his Inkbond Nexus, so He sort of spilled the beans, so to speak, and now he's just going to get blown out by a daze here from Majors. So looks like the exchange is going to end favorably for Michael. He's even dazing the misdirection, which means that he doesn't even get to kill the germ token, which is a smart move by Michael.
So Tom made his room, and Michael with multiple pieces of cheap disruption able to fend it off, and now Tom in a lot of trouble.
I mean, he still has Brainstorm and another threat, so there's a small potential he gets back in the game, especially because he was able to gain so much life here off of the Source of Plowshares. But Michael jamming in for 5 damage and going to an arbitrarily high life total against the Infect deck. But I think that Tom is, I would say less than 5% to win this game.
Yeah,
he has to draw really well, and Michael can't have anything else and probably has to make a mistake.
It needs to be Blighted Agent or Nexus Stat, and even that's going to be mowed down by this Jitte potentially.
Yeah, I mean, as long as Michael's able to draw a land next turn, he also still has a Source of Plowshares in hand, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yeah.
Real tough.
This was very close to a perfect draw for Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that he made the most out of it. Like, even though he had a perfect draw, there was a small chance. Like, if Tom had just drawn a land the previous turn, being able to play around the days would have been huge. But he did have the third Swords of Plowshares just in case.
So Tom brainstorms here, picks up a Nexus, so he does find a flying source of Infect, which is valuable for him right now, but unclear if he has enough time to really get this all going.
It may be worth arguing that sorry, what's the 1-drop's name?
Glistener Elf.
Glistener Elf may not actually be that good in this matchup, simply because you have to use a pump spell just to get through Stoneforge Mystic. But perhaps there are so many removal spells in Michael's deck that it's worth having the additional threats. So if he realized that there may be a small sideboard change for game 2. However, he does have access to 2 Berserks after sideboard, which can very easily trample over a Stoneforge Mystic for lethal. But certainly having the creatures with some sort of evasion is a lot more important for Tom than having the Glistener Elf.
But you do raise a good point. Tom's deck is fundamentally trying to be not interactive, and the Glistener Elves are definitely the easiest piece of the puzzle for Michael to interact with.
Yeah, definitely agree. Here we're just seeing Tom using a few dig spells, seeing if there's any possible way he can get out of this mess. But with Michael still having access to another Source of Plowshares, I don't think that that's going to be too hard for him to take this game. A Peeled Vines of the Vastwood could potentially protect him from that, but I don't see that getting around the Umezawa's Jitte next turn, as well as a Source of Plowshares, considering that Michael did draw the land here to potentially play and equip the Umezawa's Jitte.
Michael just trying to make sure he doesn't get killed by anything random here. We've seen him be very careful over the course of this game so far. Playing very conservatively and correctly conservatively in a lot of places to ensure that Tom doesn't have some weird sequence or combination of cards to kill him from out of nowhere.
And from Michael's perspective, Tom did brainstorm last turn and pondered away some stuff. So the last 2 cards in his hand to go along with the Inkmoth Nexus could certainly be Vines of the Vastwood plus, some other pump spell to potentially just kill him out of nowhere with the Inkmoth Nexus. So he's trying to play it as tight to the vest as he possibly can just to make sure he doesn't die. And he's doing a very good job of it.
Tom with Pendelhaven animates the Nexus, pumps it with Pendelhaven and comes across. No additional pump spells, putting Michael up to 3 poison, and adds Glistener Elf.
Yeah, and likely here, Michael's going to flash in the Umezawa's Jitte, untap, equip, attack, hold up for Lavamancer and Swords of Plowshares, and I don't think it's remotely possible for him to get out of this.
We've seen Tom do some impressive stuff, but I think even this is beyond his capacity.
All right, suit up the Stoneforge Mystic, turn some guys sideways, maybe hold back the not equipped Stoneforge Mystic.
And because this is a lethal attack with the Grim Lavamancer, Michael happy to get a little more aggressive here and send in the non-equipped Stoneforge Mystic.
And don't be fooled, that Brian Brown Duin token is a -1/-1 that just so happens to be carrying a Batterskull around.
The interactions of Legacy.
Living Weapon's a powerful mechanic.
And Tom has had enough, and we are going to be going on to a third game. Michael Majors ties it up. We've had Tom now. This is the third time we've had him on camera. This is the first game loss we've seen him take.
Yeah, he's just been 2-0ing people left and right. And I was talking to him today a lot over the course of the rounds, and he seemed to be having a lot of fun with his deck. You know, he's very comfortable with it. He was very excited to have his first open top 8 in quite a while. And, yeah, I mean, the deck looks really sweet. You know, he can obviously fight through a lot of disruption from the opponent. And here, you know, even though Michael had an absurd draw, Tom was almost able to kill him anyway.
Yeah, don't get fooled by what the board looked like there at the end of the game. That game was fairly close. You see the sideboards brought up again here, looking over Tom's sideboard. Relic of Progenitus, 2 Necropedes, a Viridian Corruptor, Sylvan Library, Berserk, a Dismember, a Dispel, a Misdirection, 3 Nature's Claims, a Submerge, a Swan Song, and a Bajuka Bog. A random smattering of various utility and removal spells, ways to fight through additional removal spells. I don't know how much things are going to change while he's on the play, though certainly Daze and Glistener Elf become more powerful when he's on the play.
Yeah, I mean, as you saw that game from Michael's perspective, he was on the play, Daze was very good. Tom was on the draw, Daze was very bad. But, you know, if either player is restricted on mana, Daze becomes much stronger. Michael able to restrict Tom much more than vice versa, simply because he has access to 4 Wastelands in his deck. But Daze being a particularly strong spell out of Green-Blue Infect when you have a really aggressive draw, because you're able to put enough pressure on your opponent with the threat of killing them that it forces them to play their removal spells early so that your Dazes actually have more value.
But certainly, play versus draw just changes the dynamic in such a large way.
Yeah.
Definitely opens up Tom to even be able to go for a kill on turn 2 more realistically.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. I think that when you're going for the early kills, Daze is arguably better than Force Will, simply because Tom's deck does not have an outrageous number of blue spells in it, so the likelihood of him having a Force Will and another blue spell is not nearly as high as Daze just being an actual counterspell in a lot of situations.
Yeah, in my opinion, you know, Tom Ross's deck is actually below the floor of what a lot of people feel are sufficient blue spells to play Force Will.
Yeah, I
We're
mean,
looking
he has
at roughly 20 cards.
Yeah, 4 Brainstorm, a Spell Pierce, 2 Probe, 3 Force, 2 Ponder, 2 Daze, and then the 4 Blighted Agent, and that's it. And I don't want to count that because that would take me a moment.
I think we're short of 20 is
Sure.
my napkin math. Michael, going back to his sideboard as well, a Sword of Feast and Famine, 2 Grimlaw Mancers, 4 Meddling Mages, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Fluster Storms, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 1 Swords, and 1 Wear and Tear. Notably, a fairly extended game that we just saw. You and I both discussed Meddling Mage potentially coming in this matchup as a way for Michael to, you know, fight over some pump spells and shut off a couple of Tom's backdoor ways to win game, most notably crop rotation into Inkmoth Nexus into kill you with a bunch of pump spells.
Yeah.
We saw no copies of Meddling Mage. That doesn't necessarily mean that Michael didn't bring it in, but it is noteworthy that the game went on for a fairly long time, and we saw no copies of Meddling Mage.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to note that I think Vines of the Vastwood is actually the most important pump spell in Tom's deck in this matchup, simply because it's a hard counter for Swords to Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares being the one removal spell of the 2 between that and Lightning Bolt that can actually kill a creature when Tom also has Invigorate. Because if you go for a Lightning Bolt and Tom has the Invigorate, not actually doing a whole lot there, buddy. Just getting smashed for extra 4 points of damage.
And the other nice thing about Vines of the Vastwood, and I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but it actually can target both your own creatures and your opponent's creatures. We saw this come up when Tom was able to actually fizzle a Umezawa's Jitte equip in an earlier round, buying himself some valuable time to kill his opponent.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I know that when Infect was in Standard, I was playing a lot of Splinter Twin, and Vines of the Vastwood was a 1-mana counterspell for Splinter Twin targeting Deceiver Exarch, so I know all about that interaction, don't you worry.
Yeah, it's bizarre because you expect most cards that say, you know, opponents can't target this to be my stuff can't be targeted by my
right.
opponents.
And I think they kind of realized that after they made it that it was a little bit of a mistake because they made Hexproof, I think, a keyword after that set came out, if I'm not, or maybe that's
I
not
think it's
true.
before that.
I think Dungrove Elder was the first card with actual hexproof like written on it,
Sure.
and Vines of the Vastwood was reprinted either in that core set or no, it was reprinted in the core set before that, I think.
Vines never got reprinted because it has kicker, and they don't reprint cards with keywords in core sets.
Well, it was in standard, I think.
That is true. It was in standard. I can verify that much.
All right. Well,
The point remains
at a
Vines,
loss.
not the most intuitive card. A little weird to be able to target your opponent's stuff with that sort of effect, but it is valuable, specifically against Umezawa's Jute.
yeah, I'm actually kind of glad it can target your opponent's stuff. Simply because it gives a little more flavor. It gives it more utility. It makes these pump spells, better in more situations. And so many pump spells are just unplayable in constructive format simply because they're too linear. Like Giant Growth, for example, not really breaking into Legacy anytime soon. However, cards like Mutagen Growth are seeing play in Modern, and Brad was playing, some number of Giant Growths in the original iterations of Naya Blitz last year. So it is possible for them to break through, but the more versatile they are, the better they can be because they have more uses than just deal you 3 points of damage or be a combat trick.
Right. So both players keep 7 here. Tom leads off with a Verdant Catacombs. Michael's hand good, but does not seem quite as flush as removal as what we saw last game.
Yeah, he has a Swords of Plowshares and a Wasteland, though, so he's protected from Inkmoth Nexus, as well as a potential draw that does not feature Vines of the Vastwood.
So Tom with the second turn, Tropical Island and Noble Hierarch. No sources of poison yet online for Tom.
Yeah, but a crop rotation at the end of turn could change that immediately, so Michael has to realize that and has to be aware of it and play around it if possible.
That is the thing. From that board that you saw last turn, Tom is capable of killing someone. So Michael has shown a lot of patience and a lot of discipline, making sure that he always has multiple pieces of disruption to back himself up, even from a board as innocuous as the one that Tom just had last turn.
Yep, and here comes the 1 point beatdowns from old Noble Hierarch. Looks like Tom's hand is not great. If I'm not mistaken, he has a Force of Will, a Berserk, it looks like a Stifle, and something else as well as a Wooded Foothills. So a little mana heavy, but not a lot of action. And Major is just really given a lot of time to sculpt his hand with Brainstorm if he wants. Can potentially, hold up Wasteland to, target Inkmoth Nexus should that become a thing. A lot of options for Michael here, and not a lot of pressure from Tom.
Michael leads off here with a Wasteland and casts Brainstorm with the shuffle effect in play. Michael starting this way to ensure that his Brainstorm cannot be spell pierced.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. You want to play around as much stuff as you can. I mean, even if your opponent does play Spell Pierce there to tap you out, it gives Michael the option to not pay if he wants to still hold up, the Wasteland for Inkmoth Nexus or Swords of Plowshares, but it gives Tom, less value from a Spell Pierce should he have it.
Tom draws Daze for the turn.
Yeah, Berserk, Force of Will, Stifle, Daze, Wooded Foothills, which he plays, and a mystery card on the very far left, which I think is a Vines of the Vastwood. Still no poison card, though, for him, so Michael not really caring too much about his life total, though. I have seen plenty of times the Infect decks just kill with Noble Hierarch, so not too shocking.
You see Michael attempt to sacrifice his Misty Rainforest. Tom again with his one Stifle. I was killed that way in Grand Prix Portland and during the Modern Grand Prix.
Oh,
so
were you also playing Infect?
No, it's 5-color Zoo.
Sorry.
Put some Rankers on some Noble Hierarchs, and that just killed me.
Yeah, I mean, with Berserk plus Vines of the Vastwood here, if Michael ever taps out... Oh, and there's Invigorate on top?
Woohoo.
Man, he could just kill him this turn.
This is juicy, and you see Tom is looking this over with 2 Invigorates and a Berserk.
It's not actually quite lethal. Once the Noble Hierarch attacks, it will become 1 power. Invigorate gains his opponent some life, so he would go up to 20. That's plus 4 to 5. The Vines makes it 9, and the Berserk makes it 18. So not quite lethal with the Invigorate. And also not really like the best.
It is really gutsy, and Tom's been conservative in a lot of spots. What is also noteworthy is he's floating out to the point where he can actually hard cast an Invigorate as well. So
Sure.
that complicates the math even further.
Right, so plays a Noble Hierarch off of Noble Hierarch, which seems a little odd because I feel like maybe the top card of his deck is really good and he doesn't want to shuffle it away, but I feel like it's fine to just keep pressuring Michael's life total here with Noble Hierarchs and kind of force him to interact with those before you actually land any of your poisonous threats.
But Tom clearly no interest in shuffling here. Just plays a second Noble Hierarch, passes the turn with 4 cards in hand, all spells, and presumably all spells on top of his deck as well.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this game goes because I feel in about 2 turns, Michael Majors is going to have to start Swords of Plowsharing Noble Hierarchs.
Yeah, you
Oh,
can
he's
see,
doing it right now.
you can understand being loath to use your removal spells on non-infect creatures because, your life total doesn't really matter as a resource. But as long as Michael is sitting on nothing but reactive cards, he's got to start doing something.
Yeah, and I think he recognized that a little bit with just the texture of how the first few turns of the game was going and recognized that there is the potential for a double Noble Hierarch draw to actually threaten his life total alongside all of his fetch lands, maybe potentially a Force of Will or something like that. With so many pump spells from Tom's deck, including Berserk, he can just go crazy on him in one turn and just kill him out of nowhere if he ever taps out for Stoneforge Mystic, Batterskull, anything like that. So he has to be really careful.
So Brainstorm resolves. Michael puts 2 back, plays Scalding Tarn.
Now, I can see the gears sort of turning in Tom's head. He's trying to figure out if he can actually kill Michael this turn with his pump spells. And while it may be possible, it's super dangerous against open white mana. Michael's not really presenting threats to the board right now, which means his hand is probably just full of reactive cards. But a double Wasteland draw from Majors means that even a drawn Inkbomb Nexus is not going to be able to fight through much of anything.
So Michael, with Batterskull in hand, refuses to deploy it, respecting Tom's ability to potentially kill him with damage from this spot.
Yeah, and it looks like a post-damage lightning bolt so that there are no kill you in response shenanigans. But, we could potentially Vines here to protect, but I feel like that's just a losing proposition. Tom opting for a Brainstorm instead. Going to dig a little deeper, hopefully, and try to find some necessary components for assembling a winning game plan.
So in response to this lightning bolt, Tom attending a Brainstorm. You see Flusterstorm from Majors in response.
See, this is really interesting because it's not actually going to counter the Brainstorm. It's just going to force Tom to crack all 3 of his fetch lands, which makes his Brainstorm much worse. But still probably worth resolving.
These fetch lands aren't doing very much else if, this Brainstorm doesn't resolve. So I would imagine that Tom is going to go ahead and find 3 lands and pay for this.
Yeah, it seems likely. Just going to go get, a bunch. Since Michael does have 2 Wastelands in play, it looks like. I don't think that's 3. I think that's a fetch land in between the 2 of them. But, he's just going to go fetch out all 4 Tropical Islands. There's no reason to fetch basics at this point because if you're getting Wastelanded, you'd rather have access to, doubles of each color of mana. So a lot of people, I think, in this situation, they see the 2 Wastelands. They're, oh, man, I have to fetch these basics so I don't lose to Wasteland. But when your opponent already has multiples in play, you already have a target for a Wasteland in play. It's better to just have the correct colors of mana.
So this Flusterstorm resolves. Now Brainstorm resolves.
Yeah, and I believe this is during Tom's end step, so there's no chance for him to follow up with an infect creature or anything this turn. Michael is going to get to untap and play probably a Batterskull without much impunity, though Tom does have access to a Daze in his hand as well as a Force of Will.
And critically, multiple Blighted Ancients, which means he can both get his Infect plan online and also circumvent Batterskull, even in the event that Michael's able to resolve it.
Right.
So now, Lightning Bolt resolves on Noble Hierarch, and Michael can begin taking his turn. And you can see, you notice the Flusterstorm, while Michael was shuffling his deck, we saw that he also brought in Red Elemental Blast. He's really trying to overload on one mana disruption, even if it's a little on the narrow side, as much as possible.
Right. I think Flusterstorm's actually pretty awesome in this matchup simply because Tom does have access to all these, cheap counter spells similarly to the Delver style decks. And having a Flusterstorm can sometimes invalidate multiple pump spells in a counter spell war. And that's not something that many cards in this matchup can actually do.
So Michael Majors right now staring at a hand of Batterskull, Daze, and 3 copies of Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, a really sweet play here would be cast Batterskull. Tom dazes, Michael dazes back, and then has access to Swords to Plowshares because he gets to bounce his Tundra and then replay it as his land for the turn. Now, he may just opt to Wasteland like twice to turn on his Daze against a Blighted Agent, but I think he just needs to put some pressure on Tom here. He has to try to win the game before Tom assembles a critical mass of infect creatures and pump spells and protective spells.
So it appears as though Michael is going for it. Sacrifices his fetch land, finds a Tundra, and we are deploying Batterskull.
Seems like a reasonable play. Daze here from Tom is going to force Majors to daze back. But then, like I said, he gets to replay it and potentially hit up Swords to Plowshares, though it's not entirely necessary for him to cast it at the end of turn because that... Oh, he didn't play his land for the turn. I guess it's not so bad.
So Tom now untaps.
And he does have the Gitaxian Probe, so he's going to get full information about the triple Swords to Plowshares hand from Majors, so it's going to be real hard to fight through.
Valuable information to know that he's got to beat a really good hand here. Although, what is noteworthy here is that Michael only has the 2 Tundras. So if Tom goes to try to overload it all in one turn, he doesn't have to beat all 3 plows. He can try to just beat the 2.
Right. Now, he is mildly Brainstorm locked. He does get to draw the other card he put back with Brainstorm last turn. But his hand is pretty strong. He has what looks like a Force of Will, a Glistener Elf, a Blighted Agent, an Invigorate, and a Berserk. I may have missed a card in there somewhere. A lot of black border cards and a lot of old cards. Force of Will and Berserk look pretty similar when the lighting is not perfect on the 2 since they have, big red corners of empty space in the top left.
All right, Glistener Elf deployed by Tom. Seemingly innocuous, but we know better.
One actual cool thing about Berserk, which not a lot of people talk about, is you can actually use it as a pseudo spot removal spell against your opponent's creatures, since it does force the creature to die at the end of combat. And while you take, double damage, and I think you have to specifically cast it before damage is dealt.
Yes.
You actually could just take care of the Batterskull for a couple turns, which could actually make the Glistener Elf into a threat, whereas before, he's going to put a spotlight basically on the Glistener Elf as opposed to the Blighted Agent, which he needs to survive. So,
all right, looks like Batterskull's coming across here. Tom, no blocks and no berserks, just takes the hit. And now Ponder post-combat from Michael.
Yeah, now I'm not really sure what this Ponder is really digging for. His hand is pretty awesome at this point. Looks like he tapped his Volcanic Island, so keeping these red spells will be fine for next turn, but they won't be able to save him this turn if Tom has Force of Will plus Force of Will plus Vines of the Vastwood. So,
all right, Michael keeps, draws Lightning Bolt again of no assistance this turn as he's.
I think actually Tom may be able to win this turn. As crazy as that sounds, he may have needed to draw a blue spell. I can't see. Oh no, he has the Blighted Agent, so actually he can force and Vines of the Vastwood with Kicker, and he can Invigorate and Berserk, and that feels like 1 billion damage. What do you think? What's your expert analysis on 1 billion damage?
The problem is that he needs to do something that induces Michael to take the action in the first place.
Well, Invigorate can do that, right? Like he can attack with the Blight Agent, Invigorate, and Berserk first, right? And then, actually, maybe that's actually no. You're probably
Michael
right.
still has access to a blocker; he can survive that. So Tom needs to actually generate something that can compel Michael to act, and then he can use those various reactive tools in response.
Yeah,
so,
he needs. I mean, honestly, he needs to do it soon, though, and he's trying to figure out a way to induce that Swords to Plowshares. And that's actually a really good point, because if you start off with the Vines of the Vastwood, that means that your Berserk possibly isn't lethal.
Yeah, the stuff that he needs to keep the stuff left over in his hand that can play against Swords to Plowshares. So the Force of Wills, of course, finds the Basswood. So he needs to be able to generate a lethal attack here while leaving enough left over his hand to beat these 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares that he knows about. Not an easy task. You can see Tom is trying to figure out if there's some way for him to induce this sequence.
Well, what he can do to, potential if Michael doesn't force the Swords of Plowshares, is he could have attacked. He could have cast Invigorate if there's a block. After Invigorate, he could cast Berserk, and then if Michael just takes 6 poison, then he could eventually just kill him with either another Inkmoth Nexus or a Blighted Agent. But the problem with that is that Michael has a Bolt in hand as well as 2 Wastelands. So this is really tough going. Needs another Invigorate probably to actually seal the deal. Wood of Foothills not going to get the job done.
So if Tom wasn't able to initiate action last turn, he probably can't do it this turn. Again, trying to go through the... He knows that he has to beat 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares. He's not aware that he also now has to beat Lightning Bolt / Red Elemental Blast, as Michael has access to both of those.
Yeah, I think Red Elemental Blast being the key one here because it is able to counter the Force of Will. So.
And there's Blighted Agent.
It's a really tight match, really tight game. Game 3 here in the semifinals of SCG Atlanta Legacy Open. Tom Ross playing Infect, trying to grind through a ton of removal spells from Michael Major's Blue-Eyed White Delver deck. This is just an end-of-turn Swords of Plowshares, looking to bait out either Vines of the Vastwood or a Force of Will.
Yeah, and since Michael only has the 1 red source of mana in his hand and 2 red sources of mana available, 2 red spells available, I wouldn't be surprised to see him try to initiate a little bit of something here with his red mana, but he's just content to untap.
I'm actually a little surprised he went for Swords of Plowshares as opposed to Lightning Bolt. Just using the Lightning Bolt as a way to slowly eliminate the pump spells out of Tom's hand is a way for him to, gain a little bit of value from, from his lack of red mana sources, if you will.
Tom takes a draw. He's looking at potentially his last turn here because of Lightning Bolt. Draws another land. And now he has to go for it, it looks like. And he is in some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, if Michael doesn't really want to respond here, it is a 5/5, Glistener Elf, which will take care of the Germ token, but it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a fight here.
In response to Source of Plowshare, in response to Invigorate, rather, you see Source of Plowshares from Michael.
I have a feeling that Tom really, really wants to hardcast his Force of Will to counter one of these spells, but he's going to have to use his fetch lands in order to cast his other pump spells. So, and that's going to put him in Lightning Bolt range, so all sorts of trouble for Tom, and it's going to be really hard for him to navigate out of these treacherous waters.
Tom trying to figure out how to proceed from here. Again, Source of Plowshares on the stack in response to Invigorate on the Glistener Elf. And Tom just a little land heavy here, just not quite the density of spells he needed.
Yeah, I mean, his deck only runs 20 land, 4 of which are Inkmoth Nexus, 2 of which are Pendlehaven, and only 1 Inkmoth Nexus draw in this game. He gave Michael a lot of time early on in this game to, sculpt basically the perfect hand against a very threat-light draw.
So Force of Will hard cast from Tom.
Yeah, I mean, this is likely going to get Red Elemental blasted from Michael. He could potentially just source Plowshares in response, but that's going to leave a small door here for Vines of the Vastwood kicked. But then he's going to die to Lightning Bolt, so...
So again, in response, Source of Plowshares. Looks like Tom responds, sacrifices a fetch land.
Yeah, and Tom seemingly at higher than 3 life, seeing as there's 2 Swords of Plowshare still on the stack. However, actually at 3 before they resolve, and likely going to die to this Lightning Bolt in Michael's hand.
Finds the Vast Wood in response. Lightning Bolt, I'm assuming targeting Tom. Throws over the Berserk, and that's game. Michael Majors 2-1. Finally stopping Tom Ross's run with Green-Blue Infect.
Crazy game.
Crazy game. Great match. Very well played by Michael Majors there.
Yeah, I thought